Good day. Today is June 5th, 2024. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. We've got our usual lineup today. Western Standard opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
Hello again.
Hello. And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Good evening.
It is a good evening. All right. Well, we've got a good show. We're going to talk about a Liberal NDP bill making its way through Parliament right now that would ban oil companies, oil and gas companies, natural resource companies from, well, talking about anything good that they do about the environment. It's possibly the most anti-free speech bill. There's been so many of them. I don't know even how they stack up.
It's hard to measure which one's the worst.
But this one's not even using the hurt feelings woke language. This one is
power from the top.
Yeah, it's just.
You can't say
this one's old school authoritarian. They're not even dressing it up in the new school way. It's quite something. We're going to talk about pride inflation. I didn't know a lot of gay people as a younger kid. I came up in a small town. At least I didn't know a lot of openly gay people. I came around to gay pride. I'm like, okay, I get it. They need to stand up and show themselves, show that they're visible and they're proud of who they are. That's okay, good. And they even had a flag for it. They took over the rainbow. I was like, I like the rainbow, but okay, fine, they can have the rainbow. But now it's not a gay pride day. It's not a gay pride week. It's not a gay pride month. There's a gay pride season, and the acronym LGBTQ plus XYZ, it keeps on expanding. The flag changes every week. So we're going to talk about pride inflation. I think we need an economics lesson here in how things work, that the more you just fill something up, the less it's actually worth. And we're going to talk about Ottawa's crackdown on non-smoking alternatives. People like me who I was smoking since I was a kid in the 8th grade. My father, his father before him, multi-generational smoker. And people like me were able to stop smoking by switching to the incredibly less lethal options like vaping. And the federal Liberals, in their wisdom, are cracking down on trying to stamp it out and move us right back to tobacco. Before we get into these topics, though, I think it's important for us to note that tomorrow is the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy. I've got a mixed background in my family history, but on my mother's side, my great-grandfather landed on D-Day, I think with the Princess Patricia's light infantry, and it was a point of pride of my family.
Very good. Yeah, it's been 80 years, but you can never stop thinking about this. When you look at the pictures, we've actually got an item going in later this afternoon, first thing tomorrow morning. Dave Backachuk, who's obviously interested in these kinds of commemorations, has got an excellent piece. And Paul Forsyth, member of Parliament, was a member of Parliament, reflects on the general value of remembrance, but with specific emphasis on D-Day. So it's a really important day for Canadians to remember. June the 6th, 1944. I noticed that the D-Day veteran Richard Romer, was quite an influential figure, but he was a pilot during the D-Day landings, and he's going over there. He says it'll be the last time, probably will be the last decennial celebration for him. Wonderful, though. That
I can't imagine
there'd
be another decennial celebration for any of them.
No.
I think this has got to be the last.
You would think.
Yeah, and I read about him as well, and yeah, he's 100 years old, I believe, and he said outright, I mean, you can only go so many times. It shows that importance. I think the same thing also said, I mean, among all of the veterans from World War II, there's only about 10,000 left. Just to remind anybody younger, if you get a chance, talk with them. Time passes, and you'll never learn better than from somebody who actually lived through it.
There's a factoid for you, though, Cory. The oldest Canadian veteran died while Harper was Prime Minister. He was 115 years old.
Oh, well, still have him for a little while.
I was just about to make a joke of questionable taste that the only veterans living to 110 will be the Japanese. You fish all that.
They're good for longevity.
Japanese have a secret sauce for longevity.
Yeah.
Okay. okay, we'll move on to the regular parts of the show here. So we got a bill. You've got a bill C-59.
Yes.
Now, this actually goes. Its predecessor, its mother bill, was an NDP private member's bill from Charlie Angus. He's a long-standing member of Parliament, and he's among the more radical left members of the NDP, which is saying something. And his was just an outright ban on oil and gas companies like that, talking about their environmental record. C-59, I think, it's essentially the same thing, but this is a government-sponsored Liberal bill in concert with the NDP. Nigel, why don't you kind of give us the Coles notes on it?
Yeah, well, okay. The Coles notes are that this bill has gone through the House of Commons, gone through the first two readings in the, I was about to say the House of Lords, but the Senate, of course. And
ours is somehow a bit more impervious.
Indeed. So it's in committee in the Senate. No date given on the Legisinfo on when it's coming out. What it does is that it makes it illegal for oil and gas companies to claim that they are doing good things for the environment unless their claims stand up to the environmental, social, and ecological causes or effects of climate change based on an adequate and proper test, the proof of which lies on the person making that representation. And by the way, who gets to say what is a good and reliable test? Why?
Well, that would be the Liberals.
No. It's worse than that. Internationally recognized methodology. So, in other words, the United Nations will tell you, which is kind of interesting because just today we got the further news that UN Secretary General Guterres is calling on countries to ban fossil fuel advertising. I guess the Liberals beat him to it by a few days, but it's pretty clear to see where the
surely
links are.
there would be no communication.
I find when he said, he used exactly the same phrase about or the same argument. He says there's a blanket ban on advertising for big tobacco. We need the same thing for oil. That's exactly what the Toronto Star says. Man, this is just going around and around in a little incestuous pool.
Well, that's where I want to go with this. So we're going to be talking about alternatives to tobacco later. Obviously, tobacco companies made some pretty outrageously false claims back in their day about their health claims around tobacco. But then they were outright banned from advertising, period. And I mean, I can see the merit in it, but it was a limit on free speech. And no one stood up for them because no one really wants to stand up for them. And I get why. But it set a precedent that you could just ban an industry from speech. And the sponsors of this bill and its allies in the media, Toronto Star, the like, they compare this to banning big tobacco from advertising. Well, it was pretty matter-of-factly proven, at least, that tobacco had a very high chance of killing you. But, a lot of these companies are doing what the government is telling them to do and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. But that's not enough. This bill would effectively ban them from talking about environmental goals that they have accomplished at the direction of the government. And then we've got Gillian Stewart. She's unbelievably former editor, I think, of
managing editor, Calgary Herald,
managing editor of the Herald. She's now, I guess, the Alberta columnist for the Toronto Star, reporting on what's happening out here in the colonies, to the mother country. And she compared it to this, and then quite explicitly said that she wants oil to go the way of the tobacco companies. That means out of business. Cory, is this bill going to have? Do you think this is just kind of a bone thrown to the NDP? It's not going to have any chance of passing. A bone thrown to the radical green wing of the Liberal Party. We're not really going to go anywhere.
Well,
I think this is a bill that doesn't pass.
It's a government bill, and they've been pushing it this far. It's probably going to pass. But Charlie Angus. I mean, he's a Fruit Loop. So we expected that out of him, and they quickly called him out for it, but then come up with their own more nuanced version of the same thing. I don't see this surviving in court. And the absurdity of it, I mean, okay, the tobacco is one thing, and even then, as you said, that shows the why it's so important to protect this free speech, even if it's from a group or a person or an industry you don't like. I mean, if tobacco completely vanished, the world probably wouldn't be much worse of a place. That's the way it goes.
You've been reading my column?
No, I should. Sorry,
No,
I will.
No, keep going.
But oil and gas has a large, measurable benefit. It keeps us from freezing to death. It allows us to get consumer products to each other affordably. It makes the plastics that we use. There's many, many benefits to society that oil and gas brought. And to take an entire industry, and what this is doing is saying you aren't allowed to defend yourself against our ideologues, and they are ideologues. You aren't allowed to point out anything you've done positively, anything that you've changed in your practices. It's quite outrageous, and it should be called out as such. But this government doesn't seem to be afraid of just C69 and their plastics bans. They don't care if the courts are going to throw their bills out. They just keep hammering us with them anyways, and they will leave it to the courts to deal with later.
Well, that's I think where we should go with the Alberta reaction to it with the Sovereignty Act. Rebecca Schultz, Premier Smith, saying that if they pass this, they will. Premier Smith wants to be the very first person arrested under the bill, and they will invoke the Sovereignty Act. I think the genius of which is not we don't have to wait 3-4 years for this to go through the Supreme Court, and then it's already been normalized. This puts the burden on Ottawa then to sue Alberta to require us to enforce these crazy laws.
I have to say, Corey, that you've got more faith in the Supreme Court of Canada than I do if you think that this will not withstand a challenge before the Supreme Court. These people are capable of anything. This is not the
Little will surprise anymore.
This is not the
yes.
Supreme Court of Canada that you learned about in high school at all. These people are social warriors themselves. But anyway, you're right. Premier Smith has taken an active approach to it. Quite how that would work remains to be seen. I guess we should let them know now they're free to advertise their product in the Western Standard. And that will, at least will be defended.
Anyone watching in charge of any ad budget in the oil and gas industry, we will take your money. We will run your ads. If it's legal in Ottawa or not, we don't care.
Yeah, and we will tell your story too, in a fair and honest, even-handed way.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just a little bit of propaganda for us, obviously. But no, the government that you're speaking of, Derek, has long ago lost any affection for the ideal of free speech. They don't believe in it anymore. I mean, it's manifest from the legislation that they bring forward, forever tightening its grip on what you can say here, what you can say there, what you can say in a newspaper, what you can say on the internet. They want complete control. So we said, well, what about free speech? They don't give a damn about free speech.
Well, this is the liberals fail to ask themselves, and actually conservatives often fail to ask themselves this too when they pass a law. How would you feel if your opponents use this law against you? So New Democrats and liberals, I don't think they've gone through the thought exercise here that theoretically Trudeau might not be prime minister someday. Theoretically, people might vote this guy out. And how would they feel? How would they react if the Conservatives simply amended this bill and said, did a Control F and find and replace in the Word document here and replaced oil and gas with environmental lobby groups? And so environmental lobby groups are not allowed to speak. So the way this is done is they're saying, well, they can't say it if it's not truthful, and they have to prove it's truthful by this measure that we are saying. We're saying this is truth, this is not truth, and if you say it and it doesn't fit our definition of truth, it's illegal. So how would they feel if the Conservatives came to power and they did a find, word, and replace and just changed oil and gas industry to environmental group and changed who set the definition of what that truth was? And all of a sudden, we're going to start jailing and people like Stephen Guilbeault for speaking their minds. And in his mind, what he says is true. And I believe what he thinks and what he says is true. I think it's crazy, but he thinks it's true. But perhaps we should throw them in jail.
Well, people should use that thought exercise with any empowerment of the government. Always think of it how would it fare in the hands of the most malevolent person I could think of? That's why you want to limit the power of government whenever possible. Any legislation should be drafted in mind with whoever is in charge at any given time may not be the right person to have that authority. But we don't think that way, unfortunately. It's myopic, it's short-term, and I think, again, some of it's just trying to save their hides, I guess. They want to be able to create a demon that they can beat down during the next election, and it'll be the oil and gas companies, and it'll be illegal for them to defend themselves.
You know, years ago, before he died, I knew the late, great Doug Christie, and we were talking about things that I imagine you would, yes. And anyway, he put it very succinct. He said, listen, what they forget is this. You're in the saddle today. Tomorrow, you're under the horse's heels. That's what these guys are forgetting.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's turn now to pride inflation. I coined the term this morning, I think. I don't know if anyone else has used it before, but it came to me. Canadians have broadly come to accept the rights of gay, lesbian, etc. people, sexual minorities, broadly speaking. But actually, there was an interesting poll I saw just a few weeks ago that support for some of these rights is actually now declining. And that's never happened before. It's been a pretty steady trajectory in the direction of approving. And now it's going down for the first time. And, the Toronto Star, Canadian Press, post-media articles I saw on this, none of them stopped to question. They all said, well, it's misinformation. It's American influence, right-wing hate groups. No one stopped to think that perhaps it was caused by the radical activists themselves. It was, not just celebrating or accepting people for who they are, but that it can be a little too much in your face. And it seems almost inflationary that economic term would apply here. We have, started with LGB, and then LGBT, and then that alphabet has just grown to include a ton of the alphabet and even various characters in it. The pride flag was just a rainbow flag at first, and it's changed. And it seems to change every month. I saw a video of Justin Trudeau raising it on Parliament Hill, and I didn't recognize that one. It just changed. I didn't even hear that one changed. And we're now entering, I guess, Pride season. I didn't know it was season until just a few days ago. There was Pride Day, and cities would have gay pride parades, and some of them would be just fine. Some of them were maybe a little less than appropriate for families and children, but different cities had different ones. And there was Pride Day, and it was a day. And then it was Pride Week. It was Pride Month. Now Pride Season. Now Pride Season really stops meaning anything. You've watered it down. It's not a day to say, we're standing up for our rights anymore. It's just watered down, Corey. Do you think that the not gay people, obviously, but the more extreme activist identity politics, kind of woke political class, that claims leadership of the movement, at least, do you think they're harming themselves by essentially just expanding it to a degree where it's just inflated like the value of money now?
Yes, they've overplayed it. As I said earlier, there was the goal line. They were pursuing some pretty solid goals. Fair enough. Sexual orientation wasn't protected as a category for people for employment or education. Likewise, marriage wasn't allowed. These were some solid things to pursue, even if some might still debate whether they should have got them or not. But they got them, and they've run out. They built their identity around being activists, not the cause. So now they have to keep trying to find more things to fight about and more time to push on it. What else are we supposed to accept? What else are we supposed to say? How long am I supposed to wear a rainbow? And it can have a backlash because people just get tired of it. And it's unfair to the LGBTQ people who just want to
I don't think you got the acronym right.
I can't keep up with it. I'm not even going to try. There's a good meme I've seen. Like a lot of memes, there's good ones and bad ones. But one of them showed a cartoon of a kid coming home from school, and he's looking at the hill, and the says, "So what did you learn in school today?" The kid bends over and he pukes, and a big rainbow blasts all over the floor because he got so overloaded with it, and it loses its meaning. It loses its basis, and unfortunately for the people who are intolerant, when you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, eventually they get sick of it and they push back, and that's when you truly do get a problem.
Well, I think even tolerant people who have bought in, they're starting to check out.
Just
they're
tired.
like, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, and what's special about it anymore? I wrote about that. I went to a pride parade in the late 90s, and actually it influenced me. I thought it was quite something. I didn't really want to go. My girlfriend at the time dragged me because a friend of hers was singing in a choir.
Was that a pun? Dragged you to?
No. It was an unintentional one.
Well done.
But
done, Nigel.
it was a good event, actually. It was just hanging with some other people and helping an uncomfortable young guy like me who didn't really know. Well, they're just people. They're doing their thing. But that was a one-day event, and it was pretty benign, and it was welcoming everybody to come out. Let's meet and greet and barbecue and watch a parade. Now, again, it's a whole season, and some of these events are getting pretty risque. They're not just a meet and greet with the local members of the community. They're getting offensive, which, again, with, I think, activists, if you can't grab attention, they feel tempted to just get more and more in your face. And that's when you see those pictures of, a guy in a leather thong in front of children or something at these parades.
Or the Toronto ones, they don't even bother with the leather thong.
Yeah, you're really losing an entire narrative and actually setting things back, and that's problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I like beef, but I wouldn't want it every day. And I think that's part of the problem. That there was a cliche, is that the love that durst not speak its name. Well, the love that durst not speak its name now will not shut up. And it's just too much. It's beef every day. So it's, they're often lauded for being well-funded and capably advised from the PR point of view, but somebody has actually not realized that you can overdo it.
Well, it's the shaming almost. I use that analogy if you're a Seinfeld watcher. There was the one with Kramer when it was an AIDS march. And
who doesn't want to watch?
Yeah, he wouldn't wear the ribbon. And he just said, I support the cause. I just don't want to wear the ribbon. Yeah. That's happening to businesses now, because you've got activists going to the doors downtown saying, why isn't there a pride sticker on the door of your business? Why aren't you flying a flag outside of they're getting that in your face, and they're getting that pressuring. If you have to twist an arm to get them to display it, you're going to cause resentment.
You got to give Jen Hudson, our reporter, a hand for actually going through the records and finding an example of each of these flags. Now, whether she got them all, I don't know, but she's got 6 of them illustrated in the article there. I recommend to readers have a look. This is out of control.
It's nuts, and there is always going to be a small group of people who just don't accept these people for who they are. That's always going to be there. But I think they're losing reasonable people who they have won over. When same-sex marriage was passed into law, I think circa 2004 or 5, the Paul Martin government, it was not broadly supported. Public opinion was changing, but it was not.
It was getting in the 60% maybe at that.
Oh, I shouldn't say broadly supported. It was not dominantly supported.
No.
It was not something we just all said yes to. A very significant number of even liberal MPs voted against same-sex marriage. Today, it's almost unanimously. There were some people were against it because they didn't like gay people, but some people were against it because they thought it was a slippery slope. They had concerns, and most of those concerns weren't borne out. It didn't destroy the institution of marriage. Most of the damage done to that was already done by straight people.
Oh yeah, we screwed it up well before
before we let them into the club. We had burned the place down. Now it has progressed far beyond gay marriage to drag queens dancing in front of little kids now, and leather daddies with barely a stitch of clothing on in front of children. And there's some odd stuff, but that's not fair to attribute to most people in that community. But it's the activist class that is hell-bent on shoving it in people's face, and it's turning people off who they had already won to their cause.
That's it. And I think the original activists, perhaps, they didn't anticipate. That's not what they were looking for. They just wanted to say, I want to marry my loved one.
Yeah.
And things like that. I look at it sort of like the medically assisted death. I interviewed one of the lawyers for, what was her name, Schreiber? She was the one. She's Fend Robinson again coming up, but wanted assisted suicide way back in the 90s. And I asked him, I said, "Is this what you were envisioning?" He said, "No, we were looking at having people who were in a lot of pain and definitely terminal and so on. And they never envisioned that we're going to start doing it for people with a mental health problem or youth or things like that." The early activists had a cause in mind. The later activists, they just have to keep pushing farther. And it's time for people to kind of say, that's enough. Hit the brakes.
All right. Speaking of going too far, that's a good segue into our next topic. So, as I said at the top of the show, I was a smoker from the 8th grade. I remember my first cigarette, and I loved it. And I was hooked right away. That's what I spent my allowance on. And then I got a job so I could buy cheap beer and smokes. And I struggled with quitting my whole life, and I just couldn't stick with quitting. I'd always end up back on smoking, and that's the case for a lot of people until alternative products came along. Off the screen here, I've got a vape, and I was sitting around the newsroom puffing on this thing all day, and I'd rather not have it. But I've settled for it as a vastly lesser evil compared to cigarettes. In addition to not smelling like secondhand smoke all day, I don't cough. I can breathe just fine. While it's probably not positive for your health, it is infinitesimally less dangerous and lethal to use. And places like Britain have embraced it as harm reduction, the kind of language liberals use when they're talking about meth, heroin, things like this. They talk about harm reduction. We're going to give you a less harmful version of this. And that stuff is only barely less harmful than the stuff they're taking off the streets. But vaping is generally considered about 95% less harmful. It's got nicotine in it. Nicotine's addictive, highly addictive. But it doesn't have any of the carcinogens that kill you when you burn it, like with a cigarette. And you've got Mark Holland. The Liberals have been kind of backing off their push to crack down on vaping. Then Mark Holland comes in, and he's an old school anti-tobacco activist. But like some other causes, they achieved everything they wanted. They've got insanely high taxes, even though that's driving the black market now in tobacco. They've banned it from anywhere. You have to go stand like a hobo in the alley if you want to have a cigarette, even in the middle of the winter. They won everything. They got everything they wanted. And they're out of things to fight about. And so now they go after the miracle product that is finally gotten the last holdouts, people like me, off of tobacco. And they want to ban flavors because it's just too damn good. Nigel, we've had some columns come out on this that you've overseen here, and the evidence is just overwhelming that this is just going to lead people to either getting vape juice. We're still going to have flavored vapes just from the black market, which is generally a lot less safe than the stuff that's regulated and taxed, or people are just going to go back to tobacco.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't it interesting, Derek, that the same people who don't want you to be able to say what you think about oil and gas don't want you to be able to have your choice of recreational, relatively harmless tobacco substitute. There is this appetite for control within the Liberal government, the Trudeau Liberal government, that it's almost as if they have to be making a headline with something. And one of these days I'm going to find a politician who says, if elected, I promise to do nothing. And I will vote for that man, even if it's a member of a party, even if he's representing a party that I currently don't support. Nevertheless, to your specific point, the issue that we had in a column this week was that they're going after flavored, what do you call it? What do you put in it?
Vape juice.
Vape juice, all right. So apparently there are different flavors. You should probably be talking more about this because I think I smelled most of them, but around the office. But at any rate, the idea is that if you can be satisfied with that, you're less likely to go out, get a pack of Benson and Hedges, and pollute your throat. Let me just say, as a non-smoker, I do recognize that whatever the health detriments to smoking there have been, far more people have had far more pleasure out of smoking tobacco since Sir Walter Raleigh first loaded a pipe and his servant thought he would set himself on fire with all the smoke and doused him with water. From that day forward, there have been far more people who've had far more pleasure out of tobacco than have ever had satisfaction out of anything this Liberal government has done. And certainly, I'd have to say that, I don't know, some of them probably would say it was worth it, even if it did.
I just want to
Give them a
unpackage
horrible
what you
cough.
said there. Are you saying that the Liberals are worse for your health than tobacco?
Actually, on a broad scale of comparison, I am.
I wouldn't disagree. Corey, we've seen this before. So Quebec actually has already banned flavored vapes, but it's still everywhere. You still get it. It's just, Quebec has a particularly thriving organized crime scene, and they've taken it over. There is still flavored vape everywhere. You want to get it in Quebec, you can get it in Quebec. It's easy. It's very easy. But officially, there's none sold. There's not a single dollar brought in from the taxes on this stuff. They're just going to push it straight into the black market, or even worse, right back to tobacco, probably.
Well, or I mean, if you actually start getting it from black market sources, that's when you start getting somebody say, gee, I found an internet recipe and I can make this stuff at home. You could actually start getting some vape juices that are harmful and dangerous because they won't necessarily be produced in a controlled environment, and you're getting something more dangerous out there. You hit it on the head at the start. It's when the activists, again, we keep hitting that. They've achieved all their goals. They can't stop themselves anymore. They got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And we saw that in Calgary. They were trying to ban vaping in city parks.
Yeah.
Why? You're outdoors. You're in a park. There's no secondhand vape health issues.
You could only not even really smell the thing.
It's harm mitigation, but they just can't stop themselves. I was a heavy smoker throughout my 20s and 30s, and when I used to survey,
you were a rig pig.
Well, yeah. When I was a surveyor, I'd always smoke the cigarette, stick it out the side of my mouth, so I wouldn't mash it into my transit when I go ahead. When I get home, I'd drive my ex-wife crazy because I'd still smoke like this for a while until I got used to being in the civilized world again.
So that's where it all came apart, was it?
Well, there was a number of things, but that was a contributing factor. And but I quit, and it took. I used the patch, and actually I smoked so much I had to put multiple patches on, and it did help me though. It took the edge off. It was a months of misery. I mean, there's a few failed efforts, but I finally quit smoking, and it was terrible. I don't think I would have managed it without the patch. That was a nicotine replacement route. Vaping wasn't around yet. Maybe I would have gone that route, but I'm very happy I quit. But I needed help to quit. These sorts of lunatics, I could see them going after the patch too. Well, it's just another nicotine delivery system, This is
that is the language they're using.
Yeah.
Is that nicotine is what's bad? Nicotine is an addictive agent, but it's not harmful to your health in and of itself.
As bad as the tar and everything else that comes with conventional
all the
cigarette.
carcinogens in tobacco that when combusted, that's what's bad for your health. The nicotine itself is merely an addictive agent, not otherwise significantly bad for you. But now they're not talking about tobacco anymore. They're talking about just nicotine. And this is where the anti-smoking lobby should have claimed their greatest victory. By doing what we've done, we have forced the market to innovate and create this alternative. And this is the final nail in the coffin of cigarettes. People are always going to have, the occasional celebratory cigar or pipe or something, on an occasional side. But this, they should have celebrated and embraced as their greatest achievement, that their work incentivized the creation of this, which will finally end cigarettes. But instead they haven't, because there's still these organizations sitting around, and they've got payroll to meet. They've got pensions. They've got organizations with power and prestige to maintain, and they have to fight about something. So they pick something that should be their ally.
I wonder how many people in Canada realize that the payroll you just mentioned is largely met by federal grants.
Yeah, it's not even donors.
No.
It's just government money.
Typically is, health grants and these activist groups. And again, isn't harm mitigation supposed to be the goal? But no, they throw it out the window, and it clashes with their ideology. And that's where the reason goes out the window.
Let's maybe just we'll check in and just do a quick update on where the Alberta NDP leadership race is at. We talked about it last week, but we're really getting down to the wire now. I think we're June 22nd, is that the date? Yeah, June 22nd. So voting is actually underway right now. I is their last debate, I think, tomorrow, or is it tonight?
I thought they had it, but I'm not sure. I can only see so much of those
I
guys.
have to take my
so like the
socialism in
gay
small
thing, you
doses.
see too much of it, and you tune out. You know.
I have to take my socialism in small doses. I can't end the whole NDP season.
Yeah,
I can deal with NDP day, maybe even NDP week, but NDP season's a bit much.
just another 18 days.
We're headed there. It's been, I mean, compared to what we're used to with conservative leadership races in Alberta, such a polite and tame affair. Are lefties just generally more polite in these things? Is it that, Nigel, do you think they're maybe pulling their punches a bit because it seems so inevitable so quickly once Nenshi entered that he was going to win, and that it may be a bad career move to burn it to the ground so hard if this guy was inevitably going to win anyway?
Yeah, I think that's pretty largely it. And so they very much regret the passing of those days, because Danielle Smith, whether you like her or don't like her, certainly has ideas, and she's driven by those ideas and not by the meeting of interests within the party to nearly the same degree. So there's some genuine bad feelings there, because I guess their contracts were upset by the change. In the NDP, the only real divide is between the unions, which have their clear interest in the outcome, and the ideologues, who still believe in some kind of socialist, communist, well, let's just say socialist outcome for Alberta. Well, as you say, it looks like Nenshi, who is pragmatic, at least in that debate, is going to take it. So why ruin your chances of becoming health minister and then quietly doing what you wanted to do anyway? Or education minister, which is where the real worry is.
Cory, I think there also might be something just to a different culture. The lefties, I think, in Alberta especially, but maybe even more broadly, they look out for each other. They take care of their own, way conservatives don't.
If they're going to fight, they'll keep it behind closed doors.
Yeah,
they won't go screaming to public like conservatives.
They take care of their own when if their MLAs or MPs are defeated, they're going to find them a job over here. They're going to put them in this board or agency or something. Now, all parties do that to some extent, but I think the NDP just has a longer tradition, a better record, not just in Alberta, because they only have one term in Alberta, but as a culture of keeping the real nastiness behind doors as much as possible, and kind of just taking care of their own when the dust settles. Whereas conservatives, we love ripping each other's heads off. We love blood on the floor, and there's good to that. But there's also consequences to it. Well, and just conservatives aren't good followers. When you're talking about people with an individualist bent to them, they're people who don't like being told what to do. It's just kind of a bit of it in your nature. And when you are in something of a top-down, centralized sort of party, like the left tends to have, you're a person who follows. You might not agree with the leader at all the time, but this is your role. You will follow the leader, talk behind closed doors if you want to change things, but you're not going to burn the thing to the ground to get rid of your own leader.
The party of the lemming.
Yes, and I think it's the left's biggest strength and their biggest weakness at the same time, because yes, the leader could lead them right off a cliff, but it could also lead them to victory because they aren't all busy trying to rip each other's throats out when conservative parties are doing that when they should be focusing on an election. But it'll be interesting. One of the bigger things too with Nenshi, he is a pragmatist, but he's hinted at it, but he hasn't set out right with it. One of his biggest weaknesses, and the UCP is going to hit him with it, is they are tied and subservient to the federal party. And they're going to twist that knife on Nenshi. And will he try to decouple, formally, the provincial party from the federal entity? And that would really put a lot of pressure on the ideologues. Do you want to stick true to your NDP centralized roots as a branch outlet of the federal party? Or do you want to have a better because they would be more electable if they were separate.
It'd be a smart move for them, I think.
That could be a real test for their party if he tries to go that route. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Just the little bit of time we got left here, we're going to start some wagers. We haven't had a good bet on the show in a while. I guess I got two. probability that someone whose name is not Nenshi can win. I mean, the two other biggest candidates, I think most indications are, is Sarah Hoffman, former health minister, and Kathleen Ganley, former Minister of Justice, Attorney General. If it is not Nenshi, it's going to be one of those two. I think we all agree it's not likely to be anyone but Nenshi. But start with you, Nigel. Probability that someone besides Nenshi could win.
Very low. But if it was somebody other than Nenshi, my bet would be Kathleen Ganley. I think one of the things that we didn't mention was the very heavy enrollment in the NDP here in Calgary. Mm-hmm. And that's got to have an effect upon the outcome in this thing. And it's going to have an effect, I think, on the way that the NDP handles itself in the future.
Yeah. And Cory, probability that anyone whose name is not Nenshi, whose name doesn't end with Spenshi, can win.
It's not impossible, but I'd put it at 10%. I think Ganley, I didn't see a strong ground team organization going on. That spike in Calgary memberships, the bulk of it has to be attributed to Nenshi's organizational capabilities. And of course, he's gotten some within Edmonton and others, so it makes it really difficult to defeat. If an anything but Nenshi movement is building behind the scenes, though, I think my guess would be they would gravitate around Hoffman, in my view, rather than Ganley.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Hoffman was more well-known in the party. She was deputy premier.
And as solid Edmonton roots going on, so we get a regional battle. But again, could she get enough together to overwhelm the Nenshi vote? I really don't.
I don't see it. And, the vote was tougher for Smith than us and I think most others had predicted. A lot of people are thinking it was going to be a first ballot. It went down right to the bitter end. But there were so many more candidates. There was close to a dozen candidates. And I think 4 or 5 of them got like less than 1% of the vote. They were non-entities. So that kind of artificially maybe kind of drove up how many ballots it would have to go through. I'm just not seeing the big anybody but Nenshi movement in the NDP.
I haven't seen that kind of campaign.
Yeah, and it's significant. If it is significant in any way, it can't be kept that far behind closed doors because at some point the people casting ballots have to know about the movement.
Yeah. So so I don't see it. I mean, there'd have to be a rift to start to bubble up and surface. And since the voting has already started,
I don't see it.
It's probably not happening.
Well, we're calling the results right now. Nenshi, first ballot, declared winner of the NDP. Put the graphic right up. Calling it for Nenshi right now.
And I got to say, it pains me terribly because I really haven't missed him even in the slightest since he left the mayor's chair and his patronizing voice and knowing that we're going to have to listen to a whole heck of a lot of them.
You know what? Alberta politics has been kind of boring for a little bit. I want it to be exciting.
Well, that's why I wanted Gil to win it. Now, that would make it exciting.
You can have too much of a good thing, Cory.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining us today. Remember, if you're not a member of the Western Standard, you should be. You need to be supporting one of the only independent, non-government funded media outlets left in Canada. The Western Standard is one of a very, very small number of media outlets in Canada that does not accept the federal government's media subsidy bailouts. We are funded by advertising and by memberships from people like you. Go to westernstandard.news right now and click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year to get unlimited access to all Western Standard content. And boy, there is a lot of it. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.